What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emory Cuzzy. I'm here with Cameron Selby. We are going to be knocking out a Thursday night football game between the Denver Broncos and my Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to be at the Broncos in Denver, -9 to the Denver Broncos. They're big-time favorites in this game and a 43 over-under. So it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, welcome back to the DFS realm, at least on camera. I know you've been doing lines from afar and in Discord and have been killing it just as much as I have as well. But yeah, it only seems right for you to make your return to the showdown breakdowns when it is a Raiders game.
Absolutely. We're definitely the time to come in, right? Today.
Oh, yeah. The roles have turned, so I am the one that will be sharing. Basically, Emory has no control. He is just here and he is vibing. So, but yeah, just give us a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. We've been killing it so far in DFS this year. Emory and Dusty have been doing a great job covering the college football realm. Emory just brought out his offensive, stock risers for the 2026 class prospects offensive side of the ball. And we'll be doing the defensive side in the coming future. Also have power rankings coming out next week. That'll be our monthly recap of the NFL slate. So be on the lookout for all of that. But without further ado, let's get rock and roll. All right. So as always, we start with the away side of the ball. And we had an interesting piece of news because today, as of recording on a Tuesday, it is the trade deadline. So big piece of news was this guy, Jakobi Meyers. He was traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. You even see the logo now already updated. DraftKings is quick with it. So he has been having a very down season, has not scored a touchdown, but he has been a snap hog in terms of the Raiders when he has been healthy, has played at least 88% of the snaps in every game he has played. And so there is going to be a big role waiting to be filled. And there's a lot of young guys that could be stepping up at least and be on the field.
Yeah, I thought that Jakobi was going to be our number one receiver. They didn't really want to throw him the ball as the year went on. So looks like obviously the real number one receiver is back and not injured in Brock Bowers. So it's going to be one of those things where Brock is probably the main guy, and then you kind of fill in with these other guys. A lot of them really cheap, though, except for Trey Tucker. Trey Tucker is $7,000. Everybody else is pretty cheap, and Tyler Lockett, Besh, Thornton, Bachman. So I think you kind of pick your poison at the bottom.
Trey was definitely a instant, I thank you at that price. But now that he is by default the wide receiver one, at least from a snap share perspective, definitely opens things up, especially with Pat Surtain likely to still remain out. And he has not had his boom game or even other than a 11 and 12 point outing, which is solid, but probably not going to get it done at this price. Since that 43.9 random point outing in a playing from behind effort against the Washington Commanders, he hasn't really done a ton, but now he's kind of on an island in terms of price range. And then everything else, it's just who's going to be the guy. Is it going to be Tyler Lockett, Geno Smith's former teammate? Is it going to be Jack Besh? Is it going to be Dante Thornton, who is the best ball name or talk of the town? Or even this guy, Alec Bachman? Don't know much about him, but he was active last week and he didn't play a snap, but he was active. So
yeah, and he's super cheap, right? Yeah, I actually want to know, who is your preference kind of down here? Obviously, there's a $2,000 gap between Tyler Lockett and Bachman, but I'd expect, snaps from the top three. So I'm not sure which one you actually have to lean towards.
Typically, they do a ton of snaps just to the first two, and then it is very by committee the rest of the way. Throughout the year, it's just been 80 to 90% for the first two, and then everybody else is around 60 or lower. The one game sample that we had last week, we had Trey Tucker at 97% of the snaps, Jakobi Meyers at 89%. Lockett had 30% of the snaps. Obviously, as you see on the screen, he did nothing with those snaps. And then Alec Bachman and Jack Besh were the two that were active but did not have a single snap on the field. Dante Thornton, who had previously been playing a decent relative amount of snaps, he actually hasn't really done anything. I think he's only caught 5 of 19 targets this year, which is pretty bad, I would say. But Geno Smith is not afraid to sling it. And if he is not throwing interceptions, at least he is somewhat fantasy viable. We saw after leading the league in picks through the bye, come back last week and having a 4-touchdown effort in a pretty solid, sneaky game. So if he can get you 27, there's a lot of opportunity to go around. So any of these guys could pay off their price tag. I probably would side with Tyler Lockett, but that's just by default. It could be just a mix and match approach and just kind of seeing how the lineups fall into your favor. Between these guys, I'd assume that all would be active, and I just wouldn't give you a dog in the fight on who would be on the field, but I would assume it'd be Dante based on the fact that he had been at least playing throughout the first half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool.
But
Let's talk about some tight ends.
Yeah, the tight ends are very self-explanatory. Welcome back, Mr. Bowers and Michael Mayer, who is no slouch himself. But Brock Bowers, his first game back, had been sitting out due to a PCL sprain since week 4, all the way up to a 46-point outing, catching 3 touchdowns, the third one coming in overtime. And yeah, he just kind of came right back into being tight end 1 all of a sudden.
Absolutely. I actually really like his counterpart, though. Brock had 81% of the snaps, while Michael Mayer had 83% of the snaps, so he's on the field also. So I'm not against playing him if you would rather have him over one of those cheap receivers that we just went over. I know that they're going to get snaps, but I also know that this guy's just going to be on the field because we want to play 2 tight ends, and if we don't have a receiver that we're comfortable with, we're just going to throw this guy out there.
Right, and I was hoping you were going to put his name down because it was between our tournament plays, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It was between Michael Mayer and the guy that I ended up picking. But Michael Mayer, like you said, still played 83% of the snaps when Brock Bowers returned. I know Brock Bowers, they line up more out wide, and Michael Mayer is the traditional tight end. And getting 7 targets, 83% of the snaps, sub 3,000. And that's a very big bargain. And while everybody else is going to be flocking to who is that next receiver that steps into that Jakobi Meyers role, well, maybe it's just double tight end, and that's just the way to go on this slate.
Yep, I think we're going to enjoy our first looks, basically.
Absolutely. And did talk about Geno. Running back wise, it is pretty much just Ashton Jeanty and Ashton Jeanty alone. He played 91% of the snaps last week, was a season best. Raheem Mostert played the other 6, and that was all they had showing for it. But Ashton Jeanty, at least from a PPR perspective, has shown some of those upsides as well. Had caught all 5 targets for 47 and a tutty this past week, and for the last 5 games has gone for at least 15. So we're really starting to see the floor in spite of them trailing for most of these games. And outside of the one effort where it was a 31-0 shutout against the Chiefs, he has really kind of done very fine. And that includes some blowouts in its own right with that 46 loss against the Colts. I know most of that came in the first half, but it is still welcoming to see that he's at least starting to kind of get his legs running a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like in our best ball seasons, we just get a guy a year too early, and it's going to be really fun to invest in him next year. So that's kind of how I feel about him. He's our running back, but I hope that he obviously improves from where he's been. I expect him to, do pretty well through the rest of the year.
Right. And just for what it's worth, just bringing up Raheem Mostert, he's played 5 games this year and hasn't done much with it at all. He did have a long run in week 4 in the one game where he actually had more than 3 fantasy points. But other than that, he's been next to nothing. So I would just not anticipate him really being of interest to me, but he's going to be very, very low owned. So if he does break one or he does happen to be that scoring touchdown, maybe that is the reason and way you get different on this slate. But yes, let's go ahead and move over to the Denver side. Denver, kind of interesting. Prices are just kind of all over the place in terms of receivers. I will select Marvin Mims, but we'll talk about him in a second. Essentially, he missed this past week due to an injury, and it was a concussion, so you expect him to miss 1 game. A second game is always just kind of up in the air. It depends on how they respond and how soon they come back. He was a non-participant as of Monday, so this is Tuesday. Nothing's come out yet, but I would anticipate we'll know by Wednesday if he will play or not. And if he does not, that really kind of just gives it a very self-explanatory reason of the 3 to target. Courtland Sutton always is playing in that 80 to 90% threshold. Troy Franklin's been the steady number 2 this year in terms of snaps. I know the snap percentage has gone up and down, but he has been that number 2 guy. And then Pat Bryant, rookie wide receiver, has actually been kind of increasing his snaps steadily. 5 straight games, at least 50% of the snaps. Has had a steady roll of 2 to 4 targets in these recent games. Got a touchdown a couple weeks ago, and so 3,200 is a reasonable price against the secondary that's been bottom 5 against receivers this year.
Yeah, the Marvin Mims, of course, if he's out, Pat Bryant's definitely in play at 3,200. I really just kind of like getting to Courtland Sutton and Troy Franklin, though, if I'm going to be honest. Those 2 guys are my go-tos, and I'm going to get...
Courtland's been kind of strange and weird because he'll have those inconsistent games where he'll be on the field, but sometimes they just will not target him. He's had 2 of the last 4 games has had 1 catch. 3 times this year he's had just 1 catch in a game. But then he's also had just consistent 6+ targets in the majority of the games. He's been a touchdown threat in games that they've at least been competitive with the exception of the Cincinnati game, which basically all that came in the first half. But yeah, it's hard. It's not a weird price point. It's just a weird, you wouldn't think that the floor would be as low as it is, being a 10-point threat, which he only got there because of his 1 catch that ended up being a touchdown.
Yeah, I went to look at Cortland's games versus the Raiders, and in his last game, he hasn't necessarily really done amazing versus them, but in their game on November 24th last year, he had 8 receptions on 10 targets for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. If we get that, Cortland Sutton, we're going to be really happy is all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously the ceiling will be there. I mean, he has those games where he's got 26 points, but guess what? Apparently so does Troy Franklin now.
Okay.
He's kind of had the inconsistency. If we're doing a redraft and you have to make start sit decisions, it's hard to trust him on a weekly basis, but he's on the field and he does have that touchdown upside. He's playing on snaps. He's doing all that good stuff. 3 straight games with at least 8 targets, has had 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games. And once again, he's got the same matchup similar. He's kind of isolated at a 7,600 price point, which sounds unappealing, but because he's by himself, it's a good matchup. I think he could naturally fall into Lions based on the way the prices are kind of divvied out.
Sure, absolutely.
And then just for what it's worth, Trent Sherfield was the guy that got the most, I guess, the majority of the snaps in the absence of Marvin Mims this past week. He only did get on the field 8 snaps, which was only 13% of the time. And that didn't increase at all because he was flirting around 20 to 30% the first 5-6 weeks of the season. So it's not like his role went up. He didn't really do a ton with it. But it's just worth mentioning since he is sub $1,000. And then moving on to the running backs, it's a 2-headed monster. I'm surprised by the price gap, but J.K. Dobbins is still kind of the 1A at least. This week, it was notable, though, that he did get under 40% or under 50% of the snaps in a competitive game. I know it's not the best matchup. He's still inheriting the 14 to 15 carries a game. Doesn't have much from a receiving perspective, but he's been more so of a touchdown or bust. David Montgomery, I don't even want to say light. He's been David Montgomery, but just without the sonic part of the threshold.
Sure, absolutely. And if you look at the other side of it, with RJ, he had in the last 4 weeks 28%, 25%, 27%, and finally broke 30% and got 32% of the snaps this last week. It's kind of hard to invest in someone I guess you can invest with him at this price because he is sub 6,000, but it's hard to invest in him when he's just not getting the snaps. He is getting the touchdowns, and I think people will go to him. But look at those rushing amounts, like his attempts 2, 7, 4, 2. Like it's really hard to get behind a guy that isn't getting close to 15 total touches in the game. So that's my biggest problem with him. But if he scores the touchdowns again, I guess I'll have to eat those words.
But also a lot of it, like you said, it's touchdown oriented. I mean, he's had 5 touchdowns the last 3 games, a lot of them in really good matchups. He did go catch all 5 targets, 51 and a score this past week. But before that, Dallas was an elite matchup, and he happened to score 3 touchdowns on 8 touches. Like, that's not something that I'm investing in. I'm happy that he's thriving in that role. Yeah. But it's either negative touchdown regression or he is going to start really eating into the role of JK. And it's not like the Raiders have been just gashed by running backs all year. They've actually been pretty steady against RB1s throughout the season so far. So it's hard to think about it, but I think it is notable that the price gap is 3,000. I think that'll make RJ Harvey a little bit more popular than I would like him to be.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we can just get under the field and be happy about it.
Right. Yeah. And then also Bo Nix, I mean, say what you say. He's honestly been kind of very inconsistent, but he's had some awesome fourth quarters this year, and that's really kind of what's helped inflate his number and his perception. But very inconsistent, under 50% completion percentages this past week. Did not look good at all, but he did, throw over 2 touchdowns. They hung on to win against a frisky Houston defense. So, and we saw even the New York game where he was scoreless through 3 quarters, was playing awful, but happened to account for 4 touchdowns, including 2 on the ground in fourth quarter salvage mode to get 40 points. So it's not like he's got that floor that you can just always bank on. This is the matchup, and I'm assuming you're on the same boat of if you're attacking the Raiders in any way, it's probably going to be through the passing game and attack. It's not like he's an unaffordable price, but it's been a little frustrating because you expected him after his strong rookie season to kind of come in and just be steady, and he has actually kind of not been, in my estimation at least.
Yeah, sophomore slump, I guess, is what I'm going to have to chalk it up to. But at the same time, like you said, you're going to attack this team through their pass game. JK and RJ are too hard to predict, so it's going to be hard to get running backs anyways. Yeah, Bo Nix and probably 2 of your favorite pass catchers are my favorite way to go with Denver. And then also, kickers and defenses are always viable.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I even think that Will Lutz is like a goblin to score 2 field goals. And he's been a very strong candidate before. Daniel Carlson actually having a down year. I actually only have Denver selected, but he's had a down year, but he's been a top 5 fantasy kicker before in the past, so he could always pop off for a couple field goals, especially when it's in Denver. It's elevation, all that fun stuff. But I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and we are going to go through our must plays, fades, contrarian plays, and tournament plays, all that fun stuff.
Sure. I can go first. My must play. Cam got to write it up first, so I'll let him stick with the guy, because I think Bo Nix has to be one of your must plays. He's just projected by far the most points. And he's going to. It's not an expensive slate. I mean, he's 10-6, and that's the most expensive guy you're going to see. So I don't think he's like crazy to get to, and like you're going to be losing out on other players, especially with all the value on the Raiders side with all the cheap receivers, Michael Mayer. And then there's not necessarily just like guys you have to get up to. So I don't think you're going to run out of money, basically.
Yeah, I think pretty much with the must plays, we were lockstep. I know I did select Brock Bowers with mine, and Bo Nix would be my secondary. Basically, the way I'm approaching this slate is you lock both in, maybe mix and match captain, but basically put both in and find out ways to get different, whether that's saving salary or finding contrarian pass catching options to select them with, doing double tight end we mentioned, or with Denver, instead of going with the Cortland Sutton and secondary pass catcher, maybe you go with the Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin, and that's just going to be very different compared to what everybody else wants to do, because it's just going to naturally build itself differently than how most probably would. So I think that's the only way to start out. And if I'm playing 3 lines, which we typically have been doing on Showdown slates lately, I think I'm going to lock in all 3, and probably the majority, if not all of them, will also be one of these 2 at captain as well.
Sure, absolutely. And then for my fade, I'm actually going to fade Ashton Genty. I know he had 91% of the snaps. I get that, guys. This is a really good Denver defense. I think that the Raiders are going to be behind. He'll probably still be on the field. So if he's going to catch like 5 passes, then I'm going to be wrong. But basically, how I'm looking at it is we're not going to run the ball very much. Denver's going to hold us, and then we're going to have to throw the ball. Brock Bowers, Meyer, your favorite 3,000 or less, and Tucker. A couple of those guys. I don't know that you need Geno. Ashton Genty is my fade because of that.
Yeah, and I totally get that. Basically, between the way I'm approaching the slate is really fading one of the top 4, and it's hard to fade Brock. It's hard to fade Nix, and if you're going to play Nix, it's more than likely you feel better if you're putting Cortland Sutton in as well. So it's just Genty being the odd man out. If you put one of those 4 at captain and try to afford the other 3, you only have 5,000 total for the final 2 spots. It is manageable, but it doesn't make you feel comfortable, and it's not a slate that you need to go just high-low. So I totally understand where you're coming from in that regard. JK is my fade, kind of a similar ordeal, but the main thing is I just don't love the pass-catching lack of upside. He has only been a 100-yard threat twice this season. Lately, he hasn't been scoring the touchdowns. Like I mentioned, the Raiders have been pretty solid against starting running backs. A lot of recent, or at least early parts of the season, they were allowing less than 3-4 yards a carry to really solid run games. So $8,600 for a non-PPR back, it just doesn't feel great. And I only feel like he can get there is if the slate as a whole is just going to be completely ugly, and maybe he scores but gets only 12 points, but maybe that's enough. But 86, that's usually not how I like I don't really feel great when that's really the outlook that I'm anticipating from that specific guy.
Yeah, and he's only going to play 50% of the snaps. He doesn't have the pass catching upside, like you said. No, I completely get that one for sure.
So tournament plays, very much in lockstep, and I think we might have the similar and same build in terms of our first looks. But Tyler Lockett, I said it was my tournament play, and it's more so just nailing or planting a flag on a specific player. I don't have confidence. It's a vibes play for any of these receivers that's not named Trey Tucker. And if you're not going to go with that, they're all below 3,000. I'm just going to inherit the narrative of former Seattle teammate going against Denver. It's not a great matchup, but it's 3,000 because he's the most expensive. Maybe that means that he's the least popular. We'll just kind of see how the ownership plays out with that specific slate, but that's just kind of the way I'm approaching tournaments. I would anticipate he would be lesser owned, but at the same time, I kind of like your tournament player a little bit more.
Well, yeah, so mine is $2,800 M&M, Michael Mayer, and that's because I think he'll be on the field. I think he's possibly wide receiver 2, if not wide receiver 3. If he's not wide receiver 3, he's definitely going to get 85+% of the snaps with that Jakobi Meyers, and that makes me feel pretty good about the fact that with him being on the field, touchdown upside if they do get in the red zone enough, and he's only $2,800.
Yeah, and I truly think the key of this slate is the trio of Pat Bryant, Tyler Lockett, and Michael Mayer all being the same basic price, and they're all going to be kind of relatively tournament play, less than 20% owned. So if you can nail one or even both of the guys, for some reason, RotoWire hates all three of them, and I don't really get that. I think that at least one of those three are going to be very viable on this slate, and possibly even two. If you can nail two guys in that range, that opens up a lot to find ways to get different and make you feel very comfortable about your line.
Absolutely. Okay. For expected game scripts, I'm going to do mine. I'm going to have Denver winning 21-17. The Raiders always play Denver close. The Denver defense is just so solid. I think that you're going to get into these like 4-2, 5-1 builds, but it's just because the Raiders haven't looked good. We haven't looked good at all. I mean, it's been bad. We've had a heartbreaker last week in overtime versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's just not pretty. And then, of course, we trade away Jakobi, who's been asking to be traded the whole year, basically. So we have less talent on offense. We scored less than 10 points in three times this season, and we just are stagnant. With Brock Bowers back, I feel a little bit better. Hopefully, he generates that thing we need, but he's going to need to get, he'll probably have 12 targets. So that's kind of why we think he's important. Denver's offense has looked all over the place this year. A couple weeks ago, they come back in the fourth quarter to win that game against the Giants. They've scored 40, but then also last week, they only score 18 points against a really good Houston defense. So I just waiting for them to kind of get in their groove. So that's kind of my big thing with them. So I think it's a lower scoring game. I want to play the Denver defense. I want to play Brock and Bo, and then I want to mix and match some of those guys down low and some of those guys up top.
No, I totally get that. My game script's kind of very similar. Actually brought down the total for Denver a little bit because originally I had 27-17, and that just feels too rich for me because I don't like that it's a -9 home favorite against a team that the Raiders have kind of had their number, at least from a long history perspective. Denver did sweep them last year, but the Raiders won the last 8 matchups before that. So it's hard to just have a confident, I'm going to ride with Denver and take the points as well. So Denver's been hard to judge all year. They, outside of playing the worst two defenses in the sport right now, which is Dallas and Cincinnati, they've kind of played down to their competition, winning ugly against the Jets, winning ugly, gross, low-scoring game against the Texans this past week. The Giants, they were getting taken down and had a very historic-esque comeback. And then with Philly, they had 3 points through 3 quarters and managed to come back and win those games. So they're not playing great offensively, and it's hard to trust them at least running up the score or having a complete game. So I think that the Raiders kind of hang around longer than people expect. Maybe Denver can pull away at the end, but I think 3-3 builds are very viable on this slate. I even said, and this was before I thought Arizona on the Monday night slate was going to just outright beat Dallas. I much more preferred the 4-2 build to Arizona. The prices were just gross to Dallas' side, and I thought Arizona would at the very least hang around because if you looked at our power rankings video last month, we had Arizona slightly ahead despite the 4 straight losses going into that video, and it was mainly because they're just a better team. They just could not close games. Dallas has just been bad, but it's been inflated because they have a lot of fantasy goodness. So Denver, they can hold on. I just don't have a ton of confidence they can just dominate like they have in other opponents because the Raiders are frisky, and they have been a disappointment so far this year. It's been a bummer that they haven't lived up to being a possible wildcard team, but it's not like they can't make some kind of run and upset a lot of teams. That's kind of been their role in recent years, and I'd expect kind of more of the same, at least going forward the rest of the year, where they can possibly upset some teams that you wouldn't think that they would beat outright otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's pretty spot on how the outlook should be. Denver's 7-2, which is just crazy based on how well they play, how badly they played offensively. But sometimes when you just have such a good defense, it just makes up for it.
And it's funny because like last year, they had the MO of just they didn't have a single win against playoff teams, and they just beat everybody else. And I know you inherit the schedule you inherit, but it's so funny how it's such a deja vu this year. They did come back and beat Philly, but otherwise, they don't have a single win against a winning record team right now. They've beaten the Giants, the Cowboys, the Jets, the Texans, the Titans in Cam Ward's debut, Cincinnati with Jake Browning, not Joe Flacco. So they've really caught a lot of breaks, and the 2 games that were competitive and against good teams outside of the Philly game, which Philly kind of gave that game to them, they lost to an Indy team, and then they lost to a close one to the Chargers, which they kind of have been doing that in recent years. So I don't really know what to make of this team. I don't think They've been showing that they're as good as their record shows, but I don't think this game's really going to help that thought process and help me find out things either.
So my prop of the night is going to be Brock Bowers over 14.5 fantasy points, because I just think if we're going to do anything in this game, Brock has to get the ball. I really like fantasy point props for receivers or tight ends that allow them to get it without scoring a touchdown. I think that Brock can get to 14.5 without scoring a touchdown. So I feel pretty comfortable with that number because of that. When you need to have a touchdown, I don't really want to play the prop, but Brock could have 7 for 80. He could have 10 receptions for 60 yards. That wouldn't surprise me. So I think Brock's number is just kind of too low.
Yeah, that's totally fair. We rarely see fantasy scores that starts out in the 14 plus range and you feel good about it. But Brock Bowers, especially coming off this past week, really just immediately inserting himself. He's only played not 4 healthy games, but 4 full games this year. And he's tight end 10 overall in the season. So that one performance just showed how dominant he can be. I totally understand and respect that. Plus tight end props, we've been nailing that. That's been our one mainstay all year for Showdown slates and props of the night. So what's one more, and just pick the best one in the entire sport. With my prop, I'm actually going to go with Cortland Sutton, and 54.5 just seems pretty low for the matchup. Like you said, last time they did play, he had the 2 touchdown effort, over 80 yards, and so 54.5 seems very low. And I think because of his lack of floor, that's why it is so low. But in spite of having games where he just has 6 yards, 17 and 30, he's gone at least 60 yards in the other games that he hasn't. So if you're picking him on the night that he's on, he's going for at least 60 yards. So 54.5 for a wide receiver one that's going to be on the field a lot, I think is just kind of a very reasonable discount.
Sure. Let's build some lineups.
All right. Let's kick it off. And I'm actually going to have you tell me what your first look looks like.
Okay. It's not probably the typical first look we're going to see. So that's why I kind of like it.
Okay.
So we're not going to put Brock or Bo in at captain because I liked how it all worked out. So at captain, we're going to put Troy Franklin in.
Okay.
He's going to come out, that 11-4 kind of gives you a little bit of a discount. And then, of course, we're putting Bo and Brock in. That's not a question. That allows you to also get Cortland Sutton. So you get all 3 of the big guys up top. And I'm fading Ashton, so you don't need him. And then we're going to go down and we're going to play my contrarian play. Michael. And then that leaves you just enough money. The Broncos defense.
Yeah, I figured you'd go them over RJ. But yeah, leaving 400 on the 400 on the table. I think it's going to be a pretty low owned captain. But one, because we saw 26-point outings, 24-point outings before. We nailed that when he was less than 0.2% owned on the main slate. That was probably my favorite tournament play of the year so far that we've called out. But yeah, I think that's very solid. There's no one that I feel uncomfortable with at all. If you can just stomach Troy Franklin being your captain, that's a really solid first build.
Mm-hmm.
Rocking with my first build, I'm going to try to do one that has a comfortable one at captain. I mean, I wouldn't say comfortable, but Cortland Sutton being the wide receiver one, I'm going to try to squeeze him in at captain. There are 2 must plays have to go in there. I put Tyler Lockett in as my next guy, and then I also wanted to fit in a double quarterback in this build, having Tyler Lockett as a secondary, and then your final guy in, it could be either of these last 2 guys. Coincidentally, my last guy in was Michael Mayer. So that's really fun. And if you prefer Brock Bowers, you can afford him at captain as well. That may be a little bit better. I don't know how you really view them in terms of upside for captain on this specific slate, but I just thought this naturally fell into how I wanted to build this slate.
Yeah, I'm so uncomfortable with going 4-2 on the Raiders side, but I completely get it. I mean, it's a pretty line, so I have no problems with it.
If you did have to pick this specific line, like this is your 6, would you rather have Brock at captain?
Probably. Yes.
Gotcha. So just as a look, this would probably be the slightly more owned, but it's only $100 difference. So you're still $300 left over. And if you didn't like that, you could easily do the same Tyler Lockett. But hey, I think it's Jack Besh. Same substitute, 1,500 remainder. Just leave it alone. If you wanted to, you could still afford Bo Nix at captain, but it's the same concept. And you can afford everything that you want, and you're way different from the field. Nobody likes leaving more than $800 showdown slate remainder. We've been very profitable this year on showdowns when we've left money on the table. So that is an easy way to just be different. If you can just nail that secondary receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to make a line with Bo Nix at captain because I think that's probably going to be popular. Yeah. his price, I would say the same. A couple Denver receivers aren't really hard to get to either. I mean, if you want Cortland and Troy Franklin, that probably isn't a problem. If you want to go all the way down to Pat Bryant, I'm sure that's probably fine too. So I don't think any of those guys scare me by any means. So however you want to build it from here, let's see it.
Okay. Yeah. So let's rock it. I'm gonna, because of the fact that he's a goblin to score 2 field goals. Usually that's a pretty good sign that you're gonna have a good outing. That's probably usually at least 8 to 10 points. So let's put Will Lutz in there. And then last guy's in. You can kind of, well, we have to put in Brock. So that's probably, this is how it would naturally fall. 4-2 build going towards Denver's side. Again, Jack Bash, if you didn't have confidence in him and you thought Dante Thornton would come back and inherit a bunch of snaps, just swap him out, 1,100, leave it on the table. It's the same concept, way different from the field. But you have the optimal, or not optimal, but you have the popular captain, just way less duped because of the way that you went about that specific build.
Yeah. Okay. One more that I think I want to see is a Denver defensive captain.
Okay. Yeah. I remember our showdown last year against Denver and New Orleans, and we were eating wings, drinking beer, having a good time watching them score defensive touchdowns as our captain. All right. So I'm assuming we're going to.
I mean, you had to try it.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's the easiest way to start. And then do you want to keep on fitting Sutton while we're at it? Okay. And then last,
you could probably fit Troy Franklin also. You could do them all. I mean, it's pretty cheap.
And that kind of leaves you to where if you are doing the Pat Bryant, you triple Denver receiver with Bo Nix. That's a 5-1 build. You've got the ultimate bring back. You have 1,100 remainder. That's fun. Didn't mention his name earlier, but Evan Ingram. Just wanted to go over him real quick. He's been nothing. We told you guys he was an ultimate fade during best ball season. Hasn't really done much snap wise. He's been just kind of mid, like 50% of the snaps. So he hasn't even really been playing a ton. Adam Trotman has actually been on the field more than him, at least in the recent weeks, where he's been about 70%. So he's 1,600 for what it's worth. One of the games he didn't have a target. Last week had 2 for 225. That could get there at 16. Nobody's going to really play him because everybody's going to be going with the Raider receiver concept or what have you. Maybe even going up to Pat Bryant. I don't think you have to go that low, but it's just worth mentioning because we forgot to talk about them earlier.
Maybe take Troy Franklin out and Pat Bryant out, and then go to those mid-tier guys. You could get both kickers probably.
Yeah, you leave a lot of salary on the table if you go both kickers. The first thought that I had was RJ Harvey as well, just 1,300 remainder, kind of just another guy out of the backfield. And also, for what it's worth, I think just because of the name value, he might get overlooked, but Trey Tucker is still in the pool, even though he hasn't naturally fallen into a build yet. I still think he's viable. And if you want to do that as just the 2 most confident plays as the bring back, you can still afford a Raider kicker in Daniel Carlson, or even if you think that Evan Ingram, and it's just still going to be a tight end slate for showdowns like it has been all year, just rock and roll with the better pass catcher of the 2.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that all of those make sense. I think the Denver defense is going to be one of my 3 lines that I make at cap for sure. Probably have Brock Bowers. I'll probably play the Troy Franklin line, and then I'll probably have a Denver defense line because I think that they're going to be less owned, but a lot of fun. And we're not very good on offense, so why would we expect to score more than enough points for it to matter by the defense's standards?
That's totally fair. Plus, for what it's worth, last week I think y'all had 5 field goals allowed to Kaimi Fairbairn. So I mean, Will Lutz, man, maybe he's the captain. Maybe Dusty would be in love with that.
That was Denver. Denver did that. So Carlson.
Duh. Yes.
Yeah, yes. But yes, the same applies on the other side, obviously. Yeah.
Yes.
But cool.
But yeah, that's all we got for you guys. We appreciate you tuning in. Welcome back to Emory to GTD. He did a great job breaking down the offensive prospects. If you guys want to check that out, he and Dusty rock and rolled with the recap of the college football realm. And now that we basically are going to get our first college football playoff ranking released as of tonight's recording. So we'll have to dive into that and see how we want to break that and approach that going forward. But leave a like, comment, subscribe. Tell us who your must plays are. Tell us how you feel about this slate and what you're planning on doing to get different. Can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. But until then, we will see you guys on the next video.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. And like Cam said, go check out those other videos and a lot of stuff coming out. Cam's power rankings, of course, my defensive prospects, and then everything we do weekly. So thanks again, and we'll see y'all later.
There you go.